Look, I've told this story a dozen times at the VFW, and guys still can't believe how it went down. But here's exactly what happened. Madison Wright stood up at the head of that conference table like she owned the place, which technically she kind of did since Daddy was the CEO. Tom, your position is no longer needed. HR will meet you downstairs. I'm sitting there with my security briefing folder still warm in my hands. 2 minutes earlier, I'd just finished presenting the infrastructure assessment for our $3.2 billion NEOM logistics deal with the Saudis. Now every set of eyes in that room was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. Name's Tom Reynolds, by the way. I'm 52, been doing international logistics for defense contractors for the past 15 years. Until that moment, I was Senior Director of International Logistics at Weston & Associates. But that title doesn't tell you the real story. See, I was the guy with Pentagon Level 3 security clearance for Saudi operations. The only one in that building who could handle classified supply chain stuff that keeps American interests secure over there. When things got stuck in red tape or some cultural thing went sideways, they called me. Not because I was the smartest guy in the room, but because I'd been there, done that, and had the relationships to fix it. 15 years of this. Midnight calls from Pentagon guys, navigating bureaucracy that would make your head spin, handshake deals that lawyers couldn't touch. I'd pulled their bacon out of the fire more times than I could count. And my reward? Getting fired in front of our biggest client. You want to know the kicker? Just a week before, Madison had pulled me aside after one of our late strategy sessions. You'll be right there next to me for the signing, Tom. This is going to be historic for the company. I believed her. After 15 years, I figured loyalty went both ways. Shows you how much I knew. Madison Wright arrived at Weston about 18 months ago, right around my 13th year with the company. Fresh Stanford MBA, 34 years old, with one of those resumes that makes board members get all excited. Daddy's little girl, obviously, but she had the credentials to back it up. From day one, she was brought in to modernize our international ops. What that meant, I found out pretty quick, was getting rid of anything she couldn't put in a spreadsheet. Military relationships, old-fashioned. Security protocols, inefficient. The personal connections that had kept our Middle East business running smooth for over a decade, just unnecessary overhead. I remember the first team meeting after she arrived. She's got this PowerPoint presentation about digital transformation and streamlined processes. Half the slide deck was about eliminating redundant human touch points in favor of automated systems. I'm sitting there thinking, lady, you can't automate trust. But I kept my mouth shut. You don't survive 15 years in this business by picking fights on day one. Our first real clash happened about 6 months after she arrived. She'd fast-tracked a proposal for some defense work in Qatar without running it through proper Pentagon clearance. The document had specifications that straight-up violated ITAR regulations. You know, the stuff that keeps American military tech from ending up in the wrong hands. I caught it during my routine security sweep. Quietly flagged the violations, restructured the whole proposal to meet DoD guidelines, and sent it through proper channels. Contract went through without a hitch. Madison never asked how the final version passed so smooth. Hell, I don't think she even knew I'd touched it. But here's the thing. It mattered to me. Because the next week I'm walking past the boardroom and I hear her voice carrying through the half-open door. We're streamlining operations, she's saying. Too many layers slow us down. People like Tom Reynolds. Good guy, but he gets bogged down in outdated protocols. We don't need to babysit clients through military bureaucracy. We just need signatures. I'm standing there in the hallway with my coffee, and something cold just hits me right in the gut. Outdated protocols. She'd just written off 15 years of careful relationship building, of keeping American contractors out of international incidents, as babysitting. I didn't say anything. What was I going to do? March in there and throw a fit? That's not how you handle things when you've been around the block. But I filed that moment away. You know how it is. Sometimes you hear something that changes how you see everything else. The thing about Madison was, she had this way of making everything sound like progress. Efficiency metrics, digital solutions, scalable frameworks. But what she was really doing was tearing down relationships that had taken years to build. Like the time she decided our monthly check-ins with Pentagon liaisons were inefficient, wanted to replace them with quarterly reports. I had to explain to her that in the defense world, relationships aren't maintained through reports. They're maintained through showing up, being present, proving you're reliable when things get complicated. She looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. From then on, every meeting with Madison felt like walking through a minefield. She'd push for speed, I'd make sure we stayed compliant. She'd send out half-reviewed proposals, I'd catch the problems before they became disasters. The whole time, she's acting like she's running the show, never noticing that I'm the one keeping it from falling apart. But I kept my mouth shut. Military training, you know? You don't let emotions mess up the mission. But underneath all the professional courtesy and perfect briefings, I was getting pretty fed up with the whole situation. The breaking point came about a year into her tenure. We were bidding on a massive logistics contract for joint operations in the Gulf. Madison had this brilliant idea to use an AI system to generate our proposal responses. Why spend weeks crafting personalized presentations when we can automate the whole process? I tried to explain that our Saudi partners expected certain protocols, certain acknowledgments of our shared history. That wasn't inefficiency, that was respect. But she was convinced her digital solution was the future. The AI-generated proposal was technically accurate, but completely tone-deaf. It read like a form letter, no acknowledgement of our military partnership, no understanding of the cultural significance of the project. I knew it would be dead on arrival, so I did what I always did. I quietly rewrote the sections that mattered, added the proper references, included the acknowledgements that would signal respect. Sent it through under her name. We won the contract, $1.8 billion over 3 years. Madison took full credit, of course, gave a presentation to the board about how her innovative approach had secured the biggest deal of the quarter. Never mentioned my rewrites, never acknowledged that her original version would have been rejected in the first meeting. That's when I started keeping copies of everything. By the time the NEOM deal hit the final stage, we were talking about serious money. $3.2 billion on the line, spread across defense logistics, infrastructure development, joint security operations, complex stuff that takes months to set up right. I'd been involved in every step, not because my job description said so, but because without my Pentagon clearance, the deal literally couldn't happen. The Saudi Defense Consortium had security protocols that were all about trust and verification. Every phase needed biometric authentication from the designated security liaison. That was me. Wasn't just some password thing either. This was verification of trust built on years of joint military operations and shared missions. You don't just swap that out because some MBA thinks it's more efficient. Next thing I know, Madison's announcing my replacement right there in front of everyone. You want to know what happened next? So there I was, getting the axe in front of the most important clients we'd ever had. But here's the thing nobody else in that room knew. I'd done my homework on this deal way before Madison ever showed up. See, I'd been working with Admiral Hassan al-Mansouri for years. We go way back to my Navy days. Served together on joint operations in the Gulf from 2003 to 2005, built the kind of trust you only get when you've watched each other's backs in dangerous situations. Now he's running the Saudi Defense Consortium, and when Weston landed this contract, it was because of our relationship, not some fancy proposal. I remember the first time I saw Hassan after his promotion to Admiral. This was about 3 years ago at a defense contractor conference in D.C. He walks up to me with that same grin he had when we were both commanders and says, "Tom Reynolds, you look like you've been eating too well in civilian life." That's military humor for you. But what he said next was serious. When we start looking for American partners on the NEOM infrastructure project, your name will be first on the list. Not your company, you. The gift I'd prepared for the signing wasn't your typical corporate nonsense either. I'd commissioned a display case with a military challenge coin from our shared deployment. The real deal. Something that meant something to both of us. Along with it, I'd written remarks that acknowledged our military brotherhood and the strategic partnership our countries had built through actual sacrifice. But I'd also spent some late nights reading through every line of that master contract. And buried deep in the fine print, I found something interesting. A security continuity clause. If the designated liaison with Pentagon clearance got removed before the authentication sequence was complete, the whole agreement would automatically void after a 24-hour security review period. No appeals, no renegotiation, done deal. I didn't mention this little detail to Madison, not because I wanted the deal to fail, but because 15 years in this business taught me something important. Real leverage doesn't come from making threats. It comes from knowing exactly where the boundaries are and who's about to cross them. The morning of the signing, Madison took one look at my prepared remarks and made this disgusted face. Too sentimental, Tom. We need to focus on efficiency metrics and deliverable timelines. Then she handed all my materials over to Brittany Fitzgerald, her 26-year-old cousin who just graduated business school and barely knew a defense contract from a coffee order. Brittany was a nice enough kid, don't get me wrong. But watching her try to prep for this presentation was like watching someone study for brain surgery by reading Wikipedia. She's stumbling over basic defense contractor names, had no clue about military protocol, and kept asking Madison what a security clearance actually meant. It's just paperwork, Madison told her. The important thing is to stay on message about our digital capabilities and scalable solutions. I'm listening to this thinking, Jesus Christ, you're about to torpedo a $3.2 billion deal because you think military protocols are just paperwork. But here's where it gets interesting. I didn't argue with Madison about the change, didn't throw a fit or demand they stick with the original plan. I just smiled, put my notes back in my folder, and let her talk about digital transformation and streamlined processes. She had no idea I wasn't fighting back because I already knew how this was going to end. The day before the signing, I got a call from Jimmy Rodriguez at CENTCOM. Jimmy's a good kid. I'd mentored him when he was fresh out of the academy about 4 years ago. Now he's a major handling some sensitive logistics coordination. Tom, heads up, he says. Word's going around that Weston's switching liaisons on the NEOM deal. That true? Looks that way, I told him. Man, that's not good. You know Admiral Al-Mansouri specifically requested you for this project, right? It's in the contract specifications. I knew. I'd been the one to negotiate that specification. Just wanted you to know, Jimmy continues. Pentagon's got automated monitoring on all these big Saudi contracts now. If the designated liaison gets pulled without proper transition protocols, the whole thing gets flagged for security review. I thanked him for the heads up, but I already knew about the monitoring system. Hell, I'd helped design some of the protocols back when I was still doing joint Pentagon contractor liaison work. Thursday morning started normal enough. Coffee getting cold next to classified briefing documents, my security badge hanging around my neck like it had for the past 15 years. But by 3:30 that afternoon, you could feel something different in the air. I'm sitting in my usual spot watching Admiral Al-Mansouri's delegation file in. These guys had that unmistakable military bearing. You can spot it a mile away even when they're wearing business suits. The Admiral gives me a slight nod when he walks in, the kind of acknowledgement that passes between old shipmates. Next to Madison, poor Brittany's clutching my challenge coin display like she's holding a live grenade. She'd spent the morning practicing her presentation, but you could tell she was nervous as hell. Madison clears her throat with this big corporate smile. Before we begin the final authentication sequence, I'd like to introduce our new liaison coordinator, Brittany Fitzgerald. She'll be handling all operational communications moving forward. Brittany stands up and starts reading from my carefully prepared remarks, but man, it was painful to watch. She pronounced modulus like mad jizz, which if you know Arabic sounds like she's talking about angry bodily fluids instead of a council meeting. She fumbled through all the military references, calling our joint operations our joint cooperations, and presented that challenge coin without explaining what it meant or why it mattered. I'm watching Admiral Al-Mansouri's face the whole time, saw his expression shift, that slight tightening around the eyes that happens when a military guy realizes someone's just disrespected something important. He accepted the gift with polite courtesy, but he didn't examine it, didn't share the traditional response that would signal mutual respect. The other Saudi officials were exchanging glances. Nothing dramatic, just the kind of subtle communication that happens when experienced people recognize someone who's out of their depth. Dead silence in that room. I knew right then we were done. That's when Madison turned to me with her practiced smile. Tom, could you step outside for a moment? I followed her out to the hallway. You know, the one lined with framed photos of all the past defense contracts I'd helped secure. Kind of ironic when you think about it. HR was standing there with an envelope. Janet Phillips from Human Resources, a woman I'd worked with for 8 years, looking uncomfortable as hell. She couldn't even make eye contact. This is effective immediately, Madison says, crisp as a military order. We appreciate your service to the company. 15 years reduced to 1 sentence. No acknowledgement of what I'd built, no mention of my role in getting us to that table in the first place. You'll need to turn in your security badge and access cards, Janet adds quietly. Someone will escort you to collect your personal items. When we walked back into the conference room so I could collect my stuff, every eye was on me. I wasn't about to give them the satisfaction of seeing me rattled, so I walked over to my chair, picked up my briefing folder, and looked straight at Admiral al-Mansouri. In Arabic, yeah, I picked up some language skills over the years. I said quietly, "May your decisions today be remembered with honor, my brother." He paused, then answered back in Arabic, "And may yours be as well, until we meet again." The translation hung in the air for a second before I walked out, but the real message had already been delivered. Admiral al-Mansouri knew exactly what had just happened, and more importantly, he knew it wasn't my choice. That night, I'm sitting in my apartment looking out at the Potomac, watching the lights across at the Pentagon. I didn't call anybody, didn't fire off angry emails. When you're about to watch a controlled demolition, noise just gets in the way. Want to know what happened next? Here's where it gets really good. Somewhere in a secure DoD server, the authentication system was already processing my removal. See, my security clearance had been hard-coded into that NEOM agreement as the primary liaison. When HR deleted my access that afternoon, it wasn't just some employee record disappearing from their system. It was a trigger. At 8:47 p.m., my secure phone buzzes with an encrypted notification. One line, primary clearance removed, security protocol 7 engaged, 24-hour review initiated. Protocol 7. That's Pentagon speak for immediate suspension of all classified operations until a replacement liaison with equivalent clearance gets verified and approved by DoD oversight. Given how specialized the NEOM project was, that process would take months if it happened at all. I set the phone down and poured myself a bourbon. This wasn't some dramatic revenge fantasy, no grand speeches or public humiliation. This was just a quiet, inevitable consequence written right into the security framework they'd been so eager to ignore. Around 9:15, another message came through. This one from Jimmy Rodriguez at CENTCOM. 3 words: "Tomorrow gets interesting." I read it twice, then powered the phone off. You know what real control is? It's understanding which dominoes are already falling and having the discipline to just let them hit the ground. Next morning, I'm at my kitchen table reading the news over coffee when it started. 9:30 a.m. Saudi Defense Consortium withdraws from 3.2B agreement citing security protocol violations. The market got it immediately. Within 20 minutes, Weston and Associates stock dropped 8%, then 12%. By the time I finished my second cup, it was down 16% and still falling. But here's where it gets really good. Someone had leaked the security continuity clause to the financial press. They broke it down in plain English for their readers. Remove the cleared liaison mid-process, and the entire defense contract automatically voids after mandatory security review. No exceptions. The article spread like wildfire through the defense contractor networks. These guys don't mess around when it comes to security protocols. Words like negligence and oversight started showing up in industry publications. In our business, that's like having unreliable tattooed on your forehead. Then came the video. Someone from Admiral al-Mansouri's team had been recording the meeting for their records. They edited together a highlight reel of Brittany's presentation. Every mispronounced term, every fumbled military reference, every moment where she clearly had no idea what she was talking about. Within 4 hours, that clip had been viewed over 250,000 times across military contractor channels. The captions were brutal, but accurate. Know Your Partners was trending in defense industry circles. I'm watching all this unfold from my living room, just shaking my head. There was no satisfaction in it, really, just the steady realization that some people have to learn the hard way that details matter in this business. Around noon, my old buddy Mike Patterson calls. He's working contracts over at Raytheon now. Holy hell, Tom. What happened over there? Madison Wright happened, I told him. Kid thought she could streamline her way through Pentagon protocols. Jesus. Word's already out that you got canned right before the signing. Every major contractor in town is talking about it. That's when I knew it was really over for them. In the defense world, reputation is everything. Once word gets out that you don't respect the people who built your relationships, nobody wants to work with you. Friday afternoon, the headline shifted from the deal to the leadership. The Pentagon had quietly placed Weston and Associates on administrative review, effectively freezing all their current defense contracts pending investigation. Stock was in complete freefall, and the board was demanding answers. I wasn't in their emergency board meeting. but I've sat through enough of them to picture exactly what went down. The long mahogany table, directors with tight lips and tighter schedules, video screens full of increasingly worried investors from 3 time zones. My phone kept buzzing with calls from former colleagues. The story they were telling was pretty much what I expected. First, they grilled Richard Wright, Madison's daddy. How could such a basic security requirement have been overlooked? Why had the only Pentagon-cleared liaison been removed at the final stage of a $3.2 billion deal? His explanation about operational restructuring went over like a lead balloon. Then they turned on Madison. Why had she replaced the company's most experienced Middle East coordinator during the most critical negotiation in company history? Her speech about efficiency and modernization was met with dead silence. The killing blow came from General Patricia Hayes, returnees, one of their biggest defense industry investors. She'd worked with me personally on 3 major contracts over the years, knew exactly what I brought to the table. "Do you even know who Admiral al-Mansouri trusted in that room?" she asked Madison point blank. The answer, obviously, wasn't Madison. Never had been. Word reached me that evening through Sarah Martinez, my old assistant, who'd managed to survive the purge. The board had instructed Madison to reach out to me personally, not the CEO, not HR. Madison herself was supposed to call and try to fix this mess. I didn't answer when she called, didn't return the first voicemail or the second or the third. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is absolutely nothing. By Monday morning, everything changed again. But this time it was my phone ringing with good news. The invitation came through a secure courier Monday morning. Heavy paper, official Department of Defense letterhead, the kind that makes you straighten up just holding it. Admiral al-Mansouri's office wanted to see me in Washington Tuesday at 10:00 a.m. I arrived 15 minutes early at their K Street office. The reception area was all polished granite and understated class, the kind of place that whispers serious money without shouting about it. The receptionist, a retired Marine with the bearing to prove it, greeted me like he was talking to a fellow professional. They led me into a conference room where Admiral al-Mansouri was waiting with 2 senior partners I knew from our joint operations days, Colonel James Patterson, returnee, and General Patricia Hayes, returnees, the same General Hayes who'd been asking the tough questions at Weston's board meeting. "Tom," the Admiral said, standing to shake my hand, still had that command presence even in a business suit. "We'd like you to join us as Senior Strategic Advisor for our North American defense operations." I listened as they laid out the offer. Base salary was $285,000, nearly 3 times what I'd been making at Weston. There'd be a $150,000 signing bonus, full benefits, and most importantly, complete authority over how U.S. defense partnerships got managed. No interference from executives who thought they could Google their way through Pentagon protocols. But here's the part that really got me. Admiral al-Mansouri leaned forward and said, "Tom, do you know why we withdrew from Weston so quickly?" I shook my head. "We were testing them," he explained. "We wanted to see if they valued the person who built the relationship, or if they believed the relationship belonged to the company name on the building. When they removed you 24 hours before final authentication, they answered our question." The room went quiet for a moment. Not awkward quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when something important gets said and everybody knows it. "Plus," Colonel Patterson added with a grin, "we saw that video of the presentation. Mad jizzes instead of majlis? Come on, that's just disrespectful." I had to laugh at that. Military guys appreciate straight talk. I signed their agreement right there. When we shook hands, Admiral al-Mansouri smiled. "It's good to work with someone who understands that trust gets earned through service, not quarterly reports." Walking out of that building, the whole city looked different, sharper, somehow. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't carrying around the weight of being undervalued. I was carrying the weight of being chosen by people who actually understood what I brought to the table. The aftermath at Weston and Associates was swift and brutal. The Defense Logistics Agency placed them on the excluded parties list, citing failure to maintain required security liaison protocols. That's bureaucrat speak for you're blacklisted. Contracts worth over $8.5 billion in projected revenue over the next 5 years just evaporated. Gone. Their biggest competitors moved in within days, picking up the pieces like vultures at a roadkill buffet. Madison got quietly reassigned to domestic digital initiatives. Corporate speak for as far away from anything international as we can possibly put you. Her modernization revolution had lasted exactly 18 months before it crashed and burned. Richard Wright, Daddy CEO, lasted another 3 months before the board forced him into early retirement. Turns out investors don't like it when you let your daughter destroy a decade and a half of carefully built relationships because she thought military protocols were inefficient. But here's the thing. I didn't need to gloat about any of it. Didn't even think about them much anymore. Their world and mine had completely separated. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my new office with a view of the Washington Monument, working with people who get it. People who understand that some things can't be modernized, digitized, or streamlined away. Trust built through shared service. Relationships forged through mutual respect. The quiet satisfaction of knowing your worth isn't determined by somebody who never understood the game you were playing. The NEOM project? Admiral Al-Mansouri's consortium found new American partners within 3 weeks. A smaller firm in Texas run by former military guys who knew the difference between efficiency and effectiveness, between innovation and respect. My old buddy Mike Patterson called me last month. "You hear about Weston's latest quarterly report?" he asked. "Nope. Don't really keep track anymore. Down 47% year over year. Word is they're looking at layoffs, maybe bankruptcy if they can't turn it around." I felt nothing, really. No satisfaction, no regret. Just the quiet certainty that some lessons cost more than others. These days, I'm working on a $4.2 billion infrastructure project with 3 different allied nations. My security clearance got upgraded instead of downgraded. I've got a team of 12 people who actually listen when I tell them why certain protocols exist. Last week, a young MBA fresh out of school started asking me about streamlining our authentication processes to make them more efficient. I looked at him for a long moment, then said, "Son, let me tell you a story about a company that tried to modernize their way through Pentagon security protocols." He listened, took notes, asked good questions. Maybe some people can learn from other people's mistakes instead of making their own. As for Madison Wright, last I heard she was working for a tech startup in Austin trying to disrupt the food delivery industry. Good luck with that, I guess. Me? I'm exactly where I belong. Working with people who know that in the defense world, relationships aren't line items on a budget spreadsheet. They're the foundation everything else gets built on. And that's worth more than any modernization initiative Weston and Associates ever dreamed up. Sometimes the best revenge isn't dramatic. It's just living well in a place they said you didn't deserve, doing work they thought could be replaced, and never needing to look back. That's my story. Now who's buying the next round?